Prince Harry sat in that witness box, tears streaming down his face, voice cracking as he choked out the words that the British press has made his wife Meghan's life an absolute misery. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Journalists stopped scribbling. Lawyers paused mid-thought. Here was the Duke of Sussex, a man born into unimaginable privilege, breaking down in public over media coverage. And folks, if that image alone does not tell you everything you need to know about where Harry's head is at right now, then what happened next absolutely will. Because here is the stunning part that everyone seems to be glossing over. This court case, the one where Harry is sobbing about his wife's suffering, covers articles published between 2001 and 2013. Let me repeat that for the people in the back. 2001 to 2013. Harry did not even meet Meghan Markle until 2016. That is 3 full years after the last article in question was published. So why exactly is the Duke of Sussex crying about his wife's misery in a trial that has absolutely nothing to do with her? The answer, according to sources close to the situation, reveals everything about Harry's current psychological state. One insider put it bluntly, saying Harry cannot separate anything in his life from Meghan anymore. Every grievance, every wound, every perceived injustice, it all comes back to her. Another source described watching the testimony as deeply uncomfortable, noting that Harry seemed to be fighting a completely different battle than the one actually before the court. And they are absolutely right. This was supposed to be about phone hacking allegations and unlawful information gathering during Harry's wild party years in the 2000s. Instead, it became a therapy session where the Duke aired his grievances about coverage of a woman who was not even tangentially related to the case. Legal experts watching the proceedings were baffled. One described it as one of the most bizarre courtroom moments in recent memory, questioning what Meghan Markle has to do with articles written years before Harry knew she existed. The emotional display raises serious questions about what is really driving Harry's vendetta against the British press. Is this about justice for past wrongs? Is this about protecting his privacy? Or is this about something far more personal, far more desperate? Because when a man breaks down crying about his wife during testimony that has nothing to do with her, that is not a legal strategy. That is a window into a deeply troubled mind. But Harry's tears are just the beginning of this courtroom drama. And what the case is actually about exposes contradictions so glaring that even his most loyal supporters are struggling to defend them. Prince Harry is suing Associated Newspapers, the publisher behind the Daily Mail, over alleged phone hacking and unlawful information gathering that supposedly occurred during his wilder years. We are talking about the period when Harry was known for stumbling out of nightclubs, getting into scrapes with paparazzi, and living the kind of life that tabloids dream about covering. The case specifically focuses on his relationship with Chelsea Davy, the Zimbabwean beauty who dated Harry on and off for years and who many believe was the true love of his life. Yet despite the case being entirely about Chelsea and coverage from over a decade ago, Harry cannot seem to stop dragging Meghan into every aspect of his testimony. One court observer described it as watching someone answer questions about a completely different exam paper. Another said Harry appeared almost incapable of discussing any topic without circling back to his wife's suffering. Let that sink in for a moment. A legal case about one ex-girlfriend has become a platform for Harry to lament about another woman entirely. This emotional hijacking of his own lawsuit exposes what sources say is Harry's true motivation. He genuinely believes that if he can destroy the British tabloid press, if he can humiliate them in court and extract maximum damages, Meghan will finally be happy. One insider close to the couple revealed that Harry is convinced the media is the sole source of Meghan's unhappiness. He thinks if he can just win this fight, everything else will fall into place. The source went on to describe this belief as tragically naive, but here is where it gets truly heartbreaking. Multiple sources familiar with the situation say that even if Harry wins this case, even if he extracts millions in damages and publicly humiliates every tabloid journalist in Britain, he is still going to lose in ways he cannot possibly imagine. One former royal staffer explained that Meghan's unhappiness has never been about press coverage. It is about something much deeper, much more fundamental to who she is as a person. The press is just a convenient scapegoat. The legal strategy of constantly mentioning Meghan in testimony about Chelsea has not gone unnoticed by the judge either. Court watchers say the repeated references to his wife's suffering feel forced and irrelevant to the matters at hand. One legal analyst suggested Harry's lawyers might be cringing every time he steers the conversation toward Meghan, noting that emotional appeals only work when they are actually relevant to the case being argued. What we are witnessing is not a man seeking justice. It is a man on a mission to appease someone who, according to those who know her best, can never truly be appeased. And the courtroom is becoming the stage for Harry's desperate attempt to prove his loyalty to his wife, regardless of whether it helps or hurts his actual legal arguments. But the most explosive moment of the trial had nothing to do with Meghan, and everything to do with a mysterious Facebook account that could undermine Harry's entire victim narrative. The Daily Mail's legal team dropped an absolute bombshell during cross-examination that left courtroom observers scrambling to process what they had just heard. They presented evidence of a Facebook account registered under the name Mr. Mischief, and claimed this account belonged to none other than Prince Harry himself. According to the defense, this mysterious account was used to communicate directly with the very tabloid journalists Harry now claims were destroying his life. Charlotte Griffiths, a journalist who has actually been somewhat sympathetic to the Sussexes in recent coverage, allegedly exchanged phone numbers and friendly messages with whoever was behind the Mr. Mischief account. The implication was devastating to Harry's carefully constructed narrative. If true, it would suggest Harry was not some helpless victim being hunted by predatory journalists, but rather an active participant who willingly engaged with the press when it suited him. Harry's response was immediate and emphatic. He flatly denied the allegation, stating clearly that he has never used the name Mr. Mischief. His denial was forceful, his tone indignant, but the damage, according to legal observers, may already have been done. One courtroom analyst noted that simply planting the seed of doubt about Harry's victim status could be enough to undermine his entire case. Another suggested that whether or not the Mr. Mischief account was his, the mere existence of evidence suggesting Harry socialized with journalists contradicts his portrayal of himself as a hunted innocent. And here's where it gets particularly uncomfortable for the Duke. Evidence presented during the trial suggests Harry ran in the same social circles as many of these tabloid journalists throughout the 2000s. They attended the same parties, they knew the same people, they moved in the same elite London social scene. This paints a very different picture than the woe is me narrative Harry has been selling for years. One source familiar with those circles described it as an open secret that Harry and various journalists were on friendly terms. The source added that everyone knew everyone in that world, and Harry was hardly the outsider he now pretends to be. The Mr. Mischief allegation also raises questions about Harry's credibility as a witness. If he could casually deny something this specific, what else might he be denying that has more foundation than he admits? Legal experts note that credibility is everything in cases like this, and even unproven allegations can create shadows that follow a plaintiff throughout the proceedings. One barrister not involved in the case observed that once a jury or judge starts questioning a witness's version of events, everything else they say becomes suspect. Whether the Mr. Mischief account was Harry's or not, the mere fact that this line of questioning was pursued suggests the Daily Mail's lawyers believe they can chip away at the image of Harry as a perpetual victim of press persecution. But the courtroom drama was far from over, because what the judge said next left Harry visibly shaken and exposed a pattern of behavior that legal experts found deeply troubling. In a moment that made headlines around the world, the presiding judge publicly scolded Prince Harry for his behavior during cross-examination. The rebuke was pointed and unmistakable. The judge reminded Harry that it is the barrister's job to argue the case, not his. The specific criticism was that Harry had a tendency to argue back about what was being put toward him rather than simply answering the questions asked. Let me translate that from legal speak for you. The judge basically told a prince of the realm to sit down, shut up, and answer the questions. The reprimand was extraordinary, not just for its directness but for who was receiving it. This is a man who grew up in palaces, surrounded by people whose job was to defer to him. And here he was, being publicly corrected like a misbehaving student. One legal observer described the scene as deeply uncomfortable, noting that Harry appeared genuinely shocked that he was being challenged so directly. Another said it was clear Harry was not accustomed to being told he was doing something wrong. During his testimony, Harry made the dramatic claim that he has lived under 24-hour surveillance his entire life. The statement was delivered with evident self-pity, as if Harry expected the courtroom to weep for his suffering. But the irony of this complaint seems to have completely escaped him. He chose to marry a woman who had her own cameras following her for years on a television show. He signed a $100 million Netflix deal that literally puts cameras in his home. And he wrote a tell-all memoir that exposed the most intimate details of his life to the entire world. Sources say the cognitive dissonance is staggering. Royal watchers have been particularly harsh in their assessment of Harry's courtroom performance. One prominent commentator described Harry as coming across as dumb and dim, noting that he claimed to have no idea phone hacking was happening despite his own brother being heavily involved in similar legal cases. Another pointed out that William's phone was hacked by the same outlets Harry is now suing, making Harry's claimed ignorance virtually impossible to believe. The criticism has been withering. The judge's rebuke also exposed something troubling about Harry's approach to this entire case. He seems to believe that his emotional grievances should carry more weight than legal facts. One attorney watching the proceedings suggested that Harry appears to think the rules do not apply to him, that he can argue, emote, and testify however he wants because he is a prince. The reality, as the judge made clear, is that courtrooms have rules, and everyone, even royalty, must follow them. But perhaps the most telling contrast in this entire saga involves someone who is not even in the courtroom, and her absence speaks louder than anything Harry said on the witness stand. The heart of this case revolves around press coverage of Chelsea Davy, the woman Harry dated for years, and who many royal insiders believe was the one who got away. Chelsea was there during Harry's wildest years. She endured the paparazzi, the intrusive coverage, the endless speculation about her relationship with the prince. If anyone should be consumed by anger about how the tabloids treated her, it would be Chelsea. And yet she wants absolutely nothing to do with this trial. Chelsea has moved on completely with her life. She refuses to participate in the proceedings, refuses to relitigate grievances from over a decade ago, refuses to wallow in victimhood. One source close to Chelsea described her attitude as simply not caring anymore, saying she has built a beautiful life and has no interest in looking backward. Another friend said Chelsea does not give two craps about what happened in 2008, noting she is focused on her family, her career, and her future. The contrast between Chelsea's attitude and Harry's obsessive need to rehash the past could not be more stark. Here is a woman who actually lived through the experiences Harry is now crying about in court, and she has chosen to let it go. Meanwhile, Harry, who has moved to a $16 million mansion in California, married a former television star, and signed deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars, cannot stop picking at wounds from his 20s. What makes this contrast even more illuminating is what it reveals about the women in Harry's life. Chelsea was never interested in the royal trappings, the fame, or the money. She loved Harry for Harry, not for his title or his position. One longtime royal observer noted that Chelsea always seemed uncomfortable with the royal spotlight, that she wanted a normal life with Harry, not a fairy tale. She has proven it in the years since their breakup by living quietly, raising her family outside the public eye, and refusing to capitalize on her royal connection. Harry's inability to let go of decade-old grievances, while his ex-girlfriend has found peace and happiness, speaks volumes about who is really driving his current obsession with the press. Chelsea found a way to move forward. Harry, under Meghan's influence according to multiple sources, cannot stop looking backward. One psychologist who studies celebrity behavior suggested that Harry's fixation on past media wrongs is likely being reinforced by someone in his immediate environment, someone who keeps the grievances fresh and the wounds open. But the hypocrisy at the center of Harry's case goes even deeper, and his own words during testimony exposed contradictions so glaring that even sympathetic observers were left speechless. Harry delivered an emotional monologue from the witness stand about how his life has been commercialized by the press since he was a teenager. His voice was thick with resentment as he described feeling like a commodity, like his experiences were being packaged and sold to the highest bidder without his consent. It was by any measure a powerful moment of testimony, and it was also breathtakingly hypocritical. Let us be brutally honest here. While Harry was complaining about commercialization, his wife Meghan has spent the last several years actively commercializing every aspect of their lives. The Netflix deal alone, reportedly worth around $100 million, literally puts their family on camera for global consumption. Meghan's Instagram account, recently relaunched with carefully staged content, is a masterclass in personal branding. The endless PR campaigns, the strategic photo releases, the calculated public appearances, all of it screams commercialization. Yet Harry apparently sees no contradiction in his position. During testimony, Harry specifically attacked the press coverage of his infamous strip poker incident in Las Vegas. You remember that one? Harry was photographed naked during a game of strip billiards in a hotel suite, and the images went around the world. Harry's complaint was that the coverage invaded his privacy, but here is what Harry conveniently ignores. He was the one who decided to play strip poker. He was the one who got naked in a room full of strangers. He was the one whose wild behavior created the story in the first place. The press simply reported what he did. Critics have been merciless in pointing out this pattern. One media analyst observed that if you lead a fairly clean life, there is just not that much to talk about. The analyst went on to note that Harry gave tabloids endless material during his party years, then acts shocked that they used it. Another commentator suggested that Harry wants the freedom to behave however he wants while demanding immunity from any consequences or coverage. Allow me to translate that sentiment. Harry wants to have his cake, eat it too, and then sue the baker for writing about the crumbs. The commercialization complaint also ignores the simple economics of Harry's post-royal life. His entire income now depends on monetizing his royal connections and personal experiences. The spare memoir, which earned him a reported $20 million advance, literally commercialized his childhood trauma, his family conflicts, and his most intimate moments. The Netflix documentary commercialized his wedding, his relationship, and his departure from royal life. Every public appearance, every interview, every carefully placed story, all of it is designed to maintain Harry and Meghan's commercial value. For Harry to sit in a courtroom complaining about commercialization while his wife runs what amounts to a content factory in Montecito is an irony so thick you could cut it with a knife. And sources say even some of Harry's remaining supporters are struggling to defend this particular contradiction. But the deeper question nobody seems to be asking is why Meghan is actually miserable, and the answer has nothing to do with what any tabloid has ever written about her. Here is the truth that nobody in Harry's orbit seems willing to acknowledge. Meghan's misery is not about negative press coverage. It is about not getting the positive press coverage she believes she deserves. There is an enormous difference between those two things, and understanding that difference is the key to understanding everything about the Sussexes' current situation. Multiple sources who have worked with Meghan describe what one called a delusional self-perception. She genuinely believes she has the talent and gravitas of actresses like Nicole Kidman or Angelina Jolie. She thinks she should be treated like royalty, not because of who she married, but because of who she inherently is. One former staffer said Meghan cannot handle the gap between how she sees herself and how the world sees her. Another described her as someone who believes her own press releases, which would be fine if the actual press agreed with them. The British tabloids, for all their faults, essentially hold up a mirror to public figures. They reflect back what they see, not what the subject wishes they saw. And Meghan, according to those who know her, absolutely cannot stand the reflection. One insider explained that Meghan expects coverage that treats her as brilliant, talented, compassionate, and transformative. When the coverage instead focuses on her controversies, her staff turnover, or her failed projects, she experiences it as a personal attack rather than journalism. This disconnect between Meghan's fantasy version of herself and the reality the press reflects creates what sources describe as a toxic environment inside the Montecito mansion. One person familiar with the household dynamics said Meghan's moods swing wildly based on that morning's coverage. Another revealed that good press days mean everyone walks on eggshells waiting for the other shoe to drop, while bad press days are simply unbearable for everyone around her. The tragic part is that Harry seems completely oblivious to this dynamic. He has bought into Meghan's framing that the press is simply unfair, that they are out to get her, that if only they would tell the truth, everything would be wonderful. What Harry cannot see, according to multiple sources, is that the press is telling the truth. They are reporting on the controversies, the failures, and the hypocrisy, because those things actually exist. The problem is not the messenger. The problem is the message. And this constant misery, this endless grievance, this perpetual victimhood, bleeds into every aspect of Harry's life in ways that insiders say are genuinely concerning. But the situation inside that Montecito mansion is even more troubling than anyone outside the gates can imagine. And what sources are revealing about Harry's daily existence is absolutely heartbreaking. Prince Harry travels constantly these days. He jets off to Africa, pops over to London for legal proceedings, makes appearances at events around the world. On the surface, this seems like the busy schedule of a global humanitarian and celebrity. But according to multiple sources, the real reason Harry is always on the move is far less glamorous. He is escaping. One insider put it bluntly, saying Harry travels to get away from the misery inside his own home. The source described the Montecito mansion as suffocating when Meghan is in one of her moods. The dynamics inside that $16 million property reportedly follow a depressing pattern. Meghan is miserable because she is not getting the adoration and respect she believes she deserves. That misery, sources say, radiates outward and makes everyone around her miserable, especially Harry. One former associate described it as a feedback loop of unhappiness, noting that Meghan's dissatisfaction becomes Harry's problem, and Harry's inability to fix it only makes Meghan more dissatisfied. Harry, bless his heart, believes he has found the solution. According to those close to the couple, Harry is convinced that if he can just destroy the British press, if he can win these lawsuits and humiliate the tabloids, Meghan will finally be happy. She will finally get the positive coverage she deserves. The negativity will stop, and their life together will become the fairy tale they both imagined. One source described this belief as both touching and tragic, calling it the desperate hope of a man who does not understand the actual source of the problem. The tragic truth, according to multiple insiders, is that negative stories about Meghan sell better than positive ones for a simple reason. She has created what one media analyst called a vortex of toxicity around herself. The controversies, the staff departures, the failed ventures, the public feuds, these things generate coverage because they are genuinely interesting to readers. Positive stories about Meghan planting a garden or visiting a charity simply do not move the needle the same way. This creates an impossible situation for Harry. He cannot force the press to write positive stories. He cannot make readers suddenly interested in Meghan's humanitarian work. He cannot change the fundamental media dynamics that reward controversy over virtue. All he can do is sue, complain, and hope that somehow, eventually, the tide will turn. Multiple sources say Harry's friends are deeply worried about him, with one longtime acquaintance describing him as completely lost and fighting battles he cannot possibly win. The worst part is that even if Harry wins every lawsuit, even if he bankrupts every tabloid, Meghan's underlying unhappiness will remain unchanged because the press was never really the problem. But there is an even deeper issue at play here, one that goes to the heart of what the Sussexes fundamentally misunderstand about public life and accountability. During his testimony, Harry called it disgusting that the press argues he has no right to privacy as a taxpayer-funded member of the royal family. His voice dripped with contempt as he rejected the notion that public funding should come with public scrutiny. It was a revealing moment, not for what Harry said, but for what it exposed about his fundamental misunderstanding of the deal he was born into. Compare Harry's attitude to that of his brother William and sister-in-law Catherine. They accepted from the beginning that press scrutiny was the price of their position. They understood that taxpayers funding their lifestyle had every right to see how that money was being spent and who was spending it. They did not love the intrusion, but they accepted it as part of the job. One royal expert observed that William and Catherine view media coverage as an annoyance to be managed, while Harry and Meghan view it as an injustice to be destroyed. Meghan, according to multiple sources, never accepted this trade-off. She thought she could be what one insider called a pretty princess, wearing expensive gowns, living in palaces, enjoying all the privileges of royal life without anyone questioning her greatness. She wanted the adoration without the accountability, the fame without the scrutiny, the crown without the weight, and when the British press refused to play along, she experienced it as persecution rather than normal coverage. The accountability that comes with public life, the questions about spending, the examination of claims, the fact-checking of statements, this is exactly what Meghan fled from when she and Harry left the royal family, and it is exactly what Harry is now trying to destroy on her behalf. One constitutional expert noted that the press is one of the few institutions that can actually hold powerful people accountable. They went on to observe that Harry seems to want to eliminate that accountability entirely, at least as it applies to him and his wife. The irony is that in their post-royal life, Harry and Meghan have attracted more scrutiny than ever before. Their Netflix deal invites cameras into their world. Their constant public statements invite fact-checking. Their commercial ventures invite analysis. They have not escaped accountability by leaving the royal family. They have simply traded one form of it for another while seemingly learning nothing from the experience. But perhaps the saddest part of this entire saga is what happens next. Because even if Harry gets everything he wants from these lawsuits, nothing in his life is actually going to change. Even if Prince Harry wins this case against the Daily Mail and every other lawsuit he has pending, his life will not improve. His wife will not suddenly become happy. The negative coverage will not magically transform into praise. The fundamental dynamics that have made the last several years so miserable for the Sussexes will remain completely unchanged. And deep down, according to sources close to Harry, some part of him might already know this. Harry's spokesman emerged from the courtroom to declare that the cross-examination had been weak, that the defense had failed to land any meaningful blows. It was a predictable bit of spin, the kind of statement you make when you need to control the narrative regardless of what actually happened inside. But legal experts watching the proceedings had a very different assessment. One noted that the judge will decide what was weak and what was strong, not Harry's public relations team. Another pointed out that the Mr. Mischief allegations, the judge's rebuke, and Harry's emotional instability on the stand all created problems that no press release can fix. The real tragedy here is that Harry is trapped fighting battles on behalf of someone who will never be satisfied with any victory. Meghan's enemies, according to multiple sources, exist largely in her imagination. She has constructed a narrative where the entire British establishment, the press, the palace, the public, are all conspiring against her because they cannot handle her brilliance. No amount of legal victories will dismantle that narrative because it serves too important a psychological function. It explains every failure, excuses every controversy, and ensures Meghan never has to examine her own role in her unhappiness. Harry, meanwhile, has sacrificed his relationship with his father, his brother, his entire family, and his homeland in service of this narrative. He has become Meghan's champion, her defender, her soldier in a war against enemies she has largely invented, and the cost has been everything he once held dear. One former friend described it as watching someone drown in slow motion while insisting they are actually swimming. The question that haunts everyone who once cared about Harry is whether he will ever wake up. Will he ever realize that the source of his unhappiness is not the British tabloids, not his family, not the institution he was born into? Will he ever understand that the misery he described so emotionally in court has nothing to do with the Daily Mail and everything to do with the person living under his own roof? Only time will tell, but the signs so far are not encouraging. Drop your thoughts below. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned. The next video is waiting, and you will not believe what is coming next.